Hey, good morning. Welcome back to Soul. Thank you so much for making time for me today. Today, I'd like to focus on a very powerful concept that I also only learned about recently that apparently can transform our lives. That is the process of removing the ego. But here's the fun bit. In order to remove your ego, or to let go of it, or to move on from it, or to grow from it, you first need to identify it. Our ego will often disguise itself in very subtle ways, and that will influence our thoughts and our actions without us even realizing it sometimes. But by recognizing these patterns, we can begin to let go of the ego and live more authentically. So, how do we actually do that? Well, one way to identify the ego is by noticing when we feel the need to be right. For example, during a disagreement, your ego will compel you sometimes to argue endlessly just to prove the point. Sometimes it doesn't even matter that you reach the truth. All it matters is that you are right. So try to observe this urge and ask yourself, is being right to me more important than understanding the other person? By shifting the focus from winning the argument to understanding, we diminish the ego's control. Another example is seeking validation from others. Now, that is something I'm an expert at. The ego thrives on external approval and reassurance and recognition. And if you find yourself constantly seeking praise or feeling down when you don't receive it, this is your ego at play. You can recognize these moments and remind yourself that your true self-worth comes from you, from within, not from others' opinions. The ego will also manifest itself as a fear of failure. We might avoid trying new things or taking risks because the ego fears being seen as imperfect or not good enough. For example, if you want to start a new hobby but you're afraid of not being good at it, acknowledge this fear as the ego's way of protecting itself. And instead embrace the learning process and just allow yourself to make mistakes. We need to understand that growth comes from trying, not from perfection. Beyond that, the ego will often drive us to compare ourselves to others. Whether it's through social media or in real life, we'll feel superior or inferior based on these comparisons. Notice when you're engaging in this behavior and remind yourself that everyone's journey is unique and different. Instead of comparing, focus on your own growth and progress. How was I yesterday versus how am I today? Removing the ego is not about erasing our sense of self, but it's really about recognizing and letting go of the barriers that it creates. Be sure to always practice mindfulness and self-reflection and self-awareness to become more aware of the ego's influence. As always, I always mention this, but meditation, journaling, seeking feedback from trusted friends or professionals as well can also help you see your ego more clearly. As you begin to identify the ego in these various forms, you can then start to release its hold on you. We can then start practicing when we're in an argument. I can feel my ego taking over the conversation, and I can keep my voice down and then instead focus on the truth, focus on understanding. And this will lead to more genuine relationships. For ourselves, it'll lead to a deeper sense of inner peace and a life driven by purpose instead of egoic desires. Remember that the journey to removing the ego is one that is ongoing and requires patience and compassion towards yourself. Let's strive to identify and overcome the ego, creating a more authentic and fulfilling life. By doing so, we open ourselves to deeper connections, personal growth, and ultimately a richer experience of everything that we feel around us. As always, it's step by step, day by day. Thanks for your time. Happy learning and growing, and I will see you next week on Soul.